Did you see the story about the kid in Utah? It was making the rounds this week. Zach Waters, 13 years old, spent his whole summer designing and printing a custom wheelchair for a 21-month-old who needed one. 13. A full mobility device, size for a toddler, off a desktop printer.
When I was 13, my crowning achievement was a birdhouse that no bird ever entered. It's been bouncing around aggregator sites more than local news, so the details are a little thin, but the core of it is the kind of thing this hobby is for. Mass production will never make a chair for one specific 21-month-old. A kid with a printer and a summer can.
That's what gets me about it. The economics of manufacturing say that child's problem is too small to solve. There's no tooling budget on earth that pencils out for a market of one. And desktop printing just ignores the economics. One person, one problem, one solution.
The engineer in me does want somebody to check the fasteners and the load cases before a toddler goes downhill in it. Assistive devices are the one category where it printed fine isn't the finish line. A layer line that fails in a phone stand is a shrug. The same failure in a wheelchair caster is a different conversation.
Sure, and I'd hope anyone attempting something like this loops in a physical therapist or someone who knows mobility devices. But as a picture of what one motivated person can do with the tools we all have at home. More of this, please. And that story is a good ramp into the week, because my rate on the last 7 days is this. The money pouring into industrial 3D printing is now moving faster than anyone's ability to verify it, while the machines makers can buy today keep quietly getting better. We've got a reported $1 billion+ raise for Hadrian, Hyundai, and Kia, opening a dedicated additive center, Prusa refreshing its entire lineup, a QIDI review worth your time, and Bambu Lab teasing something with a laser in it.
The one I keep circling back to is that Hadrian number. $1.4 billion is a headline that should be everywhere, and it's conspicuously not. I want to talk about why that itch won't go away.
And let's start there, because it's the biggest number I've ever typed into a script for this show. And I couldn't confirm it if my job depended on it, which, arguably, it does. So here's the story as reported. 3dprint.com ran a piece this week saying, Hadrian, the industrial automation startup building out a network of advanced manufacturing facilities, closed a $1.4 billion Series D at a $7.9 billion valuation. If that's accurate, it's one of the largest private capital infusions in additive manufacturing history. Full stop. Not one of the largest this year, one of the largest ever.
And for anyone who hasn't followed them, Hadrian's whole pitch is factories, not printers. Highly automated facilities making precision parts for aerospace and defense customers with additive as one tool in the stack alongside machining and everything else. Investors love that model right now because you're not betting on a machine company selling boxes into an uncertain market. You're betting on capacity on the parts themselves, which, to be clear, is a smarter bet than most of what got funded in the last additive gold rush. The companies that got hammered were the ones selling shovels into a market that stopped digging. Selling the parts directly means your customer doesn't need to believe in 3D printing. They just need the bracket on time and in spec.
Right. But here's where my old reporter instincts start twitching. A $1.4 billion round is not a niche story. That's a number that shows up in Bloomberg, Reuters, The Journal within hours, usually with named investors doing victory laps in the press release. As of us recording, I have found one trade publication carrying it. No financial press, no filing I could turn up, nothing from investors themselves.
Which is strange because raises this size leave paper trails almost by default. Quick detour for anyone who doesn't live in this world. When a U.S. company sells equity in a big private round, there's typically a Form D filed with the SEC. It's public, it's searchable, and journalists check it precisely because it's the boring, verifiable backstop behind the press release. Venture firms also announce their big checks because that's how they raise their next fund. So when the paper trail and the coverage and the investor victory laps are all missing at once, you don't call the story false. You just hold it very loosely. And there's a second thing bugging me. Their Series C was reported around 200 million. Going from that to 1.4 billion in one step is a sevenfold jump. Not impossible. In this climate, defense-adjacent manufacturing is white hot. But headline raise numbers for capital-intensive companies sometimes blend equity with debt or equipment financing to make one big impressive figure. $1 billion of loans secured against machine tools is a very different story than $1 billion of investors buying shares at a $7.9 billion price.
Walk me through why that distinction matters to anyone outside a finance desk, though. Money is money if it buys machines, no?
For the machines, sure. For reading the company's health, no. Equity at a $7.9 billion valuation means sophisticated investors looked at the books and said, this business is worth $8 billion. That's a market signal about the whole sector. Debt just means a lender thinks the equipment is good collateral. One tells you additive heavy manufacturing is being valued like a rocket company. The other tells you banks will finance CNC machines, which we already knew.
To be fair to Hadrian, a blended structure wouldn't even be scandalous. Factories are brutally expensive. Buildings, machines, qualification, people. If you're building physical manufacturing capacity at scale, debt against equipment is how grown-up companies do it. It just means the headline number needs a footnote we don't currently have.
Agreed. So let's take the optimistic branch for a second. Say the number is real, more or less as reported. Then this matters enormously for our corner of the world because a company with that kind of war chest, buying manufacturing equipment, moves markets. If Hadrian standardizes on particular machine platforms, that's a windfall for those OEMs, a drought for the ones passed over, and a signal to everyone else about what production grade means in practice. Machine vendors will be watching their purchase orders like hawks.
The framing in the coverage is also worth pausing on. The story positions additive as an underpinning of U.S. military readiness, with Hadrian at the center of that narrative. Now, the Department of Defense adopting additive manufacturing is a real documented trend, and it's a big part of why money is flowing into this sector at all. But we are the backbone of military readiness, is Hadrian's own positioning. That's the pitch deck talking, not an independent assessment, and the article doesn't draw that line very hard.
Back when I was in industry, every additive company within shouting distance of an Air Force base claimed defense pull. Some of it was real. Most of it was a slide. The reality is that qualification is the moat. Getting a printed part approved to fly on something that shoots back takes years of process control, documentation, witness coupons, testing. Money accelerates that, but it doesn't skip it. Nobody has ever bought their way past a qualification program.
So what does a listener do with this? For most of us, nothing changes on the bench Monday morning. But if you work anywhere near industrial additive manufacturing, machine sales, materials, service bureaus, watch what Hadrian buys if this capital is real. Whether they spread orders around or concentrate on a couple of platforms could reshape who wins in industrial additive over the next few years. That's the practical thread to pull.
My verdict, plausible, unconfirmed, and worth a big mental asterisk. If the round is real, corroboration will arrive soon. Filings, financial press, investor announcements, all the normal machinery. If it gets quietly restated later as something smaller or structured differently, as well, you heard the eyebrow raise here first.
An audible eyebrow raise. That's craft. Okay, from a number nobody's confirmed to hardware you can order today, because Prusa did something interesting this week. Prusa announced second-generation versions across basically the whole current lineup. The XL, the Core 1, and the Core 1L all get Plus models. And the detail that jumped out at me, every new order automatically gets the updated version at no extra cost. That's on Prusa's own blog, and Tom's Hardware confirmed the free upgrade for new orders angle in their coverage.
That free bit is the notable move, honestly. In manufacturing terms, this is a running change. You improve the product mid-cycle without spinning up a new SKU and a new marketing campaign. Lots of companies do it silently, and you find out from teardown videos that units built in March are quietly different from units built in July. Prusa announcing it openly and eating the cost for orders already in the queue is the right way to do it. It also tells you the changes are meaningful enough to be worth announcing, that you don't hold a press moment for a new cable clip.
And the changes are reportedly driven by user feedback, including, it seems, the Core 1 nozzle complaints that have been circulating in the community for a while. The link between specific complaints and specific fixes stays fairly general in the announcement, so I wouldn't claim a one-to-one mapping. But the direction is clear. They listened and they shipped.
Two caveats before anyone gets carried away, though. One, if you already own a current gen machine, there is no published retrofit list yet. Don't assume you can bolt Gen 2 parts onto your existing printer until Prusa says so explicitly. Two, the performance improvements are Prusa's own characterization at this point. Nobody independent has put a Gen 2 unit through its paces. Better surface finish with no test methodology attached is a promise, not a measurement. I expect the claims are directionally true, but expect and know are different words.
Fair on both. I'll say this, though. Given how rough the community conversation around Prusa has been this year, shipping hardware fixes instead of arguing about licenses is a very good look. This is the version of the company people fell in love with. Iterate in the open, take the feedback, improve the machine. And as an owner of an aging bedslinger, the thing I'd watch for is that retrofit story. Prusa built its reputation on upgrade paths. The i3 line was famously one long continuous upgrade, where a printer bought years earlier could be walked forward version by version. If Gen 2 turns out to be new orders only with nothing for existing owners, that'll sting a specific kind of loyal customer, the kind who's been defending them in forum threads all year.
Which is why I'd bet they're working on that list right now. Some changes will be printable or bolt-on. Some will be baked into machined parts you can't practically swap. Announcing the refresh first and the retrofit path second is a fine sequence as long as the second part arrives. Give it a few weeks before drawing conclusions either way. All right, my favorite story of the week, and I mean that without irony, Hyundai Motor Group and Kia opened a dedicated additive manufacturing solution center, the AMSC, at their Namyang R&D campus in Hwaseong, South Korea. Both 3D natives and 3dprint.com covered it. No billion-dollar headline, no teaser silhouette, just a major automaker putting a name, a building, and presumably a budget on additive. This is the quietly important one.
The detail that stopped me was the timeline. Their first industrial 3D printer reportedly went in back in 1996. 1996. That's the era when industrial 3D printer meant a stereolithography machine the size of a wardrobe, making translucent prototype parts that engineers passed around a conference table. 30 years of institutional experience is not a company chasing a trend. That's a company that's been quietly using the technology since before most of our listeners had heard of it.
And that history is why a dedicated center matters more than it might sound. Automotive additive manufacturing has a well-worn ceiling, prototypes, jigs, fixtures, tooling, enormously valuable. A printed assembly fixture can pay for a printer in a month, but it lives scattered across departments. A printer in the design studio, a printer in the tooling shop, nobody sharing settings, nobody writing anything down. Consolidating it into one facility is how you turn tribal knowledge into process knowledge. One of my students asked me last term why big companies bother with dedicated additive manufacturing centers when the printers work fine where they are. And this is the answer. The printers aren't the point. The shared standards are.
The framing in the coverage is that the AMSC handles both research and production printing. So the honest question, is this a production facility or an R&D center with production ambitions?
Honest answer, the sources describe the dual function, but neither names a specific serial production part, a material standard, or a qualification program. So I'd treat the production angle as aspirational until we see a part number on a car you can buy. And to be clear about why that bar is so high, automotive serial production means tens or hundreds of thousands of identical parts at a cost target of often a few dollars each, with warranty exposure measured in years. Print processes that take hours per part have to find very specific niches to survive that math.
Where the math does work, though, it works beautifully. Low volume variants, personalization, motorsport, and the sleeper category, spare parts for models they no longer tool for. A car company sitting on 30 years of discontinued vehicles has a real business case for printing obsolete components on demand rather than warehousing injection molds forever. Somebody out there needs a trim clip for a 2003 sedan, and the mold for it is long gone.
That's the kind of application a consolidated center makes possible because it needs the boring stuff, validated materials, repeatable processes, documentation, more than it needs any single clever print. What I'll be watching is whether supplier qualification requirements and material specs start flowing out of this place. When a major OEM writes an additive manufacturing spec, the whole supply chain reads it, because meeting that spec becomes the price of admission for every vendor who wants the business.
So the takeaway is, don't expect printed fenders next year, but do expect Hyundai's homework to shape how other automakers grade theirs. Good news story, no asterisk needed on the facts. The center is open, the history is real, a nice change of pace this week. Speaking of things with receipts, let's talk about the QIDI Plus5, because Tom's Hardware published a full review this week and called it the best QIDI printer yet. Big build volume, and the standout finding was how well it handled difficult technical filaments. And what a relief after the Hadrian story. This is a machine somebody independent set up, ran, and judged. Not a press release, not a teaser, a review.
The best QIDI yet line carries some weight too, because Tom's has reviewed their previous machines. That's a comparison with receipts behind it, not a cold take. Still one reviewer and one unit, so calibrate accordingly. But handles tough filaments well is the claim I care about, because that's where large format machines usually fall apart. Engineering materials want heat, hot chamber, hot bed, stable temperatures throughout the print. Big open volumes bleed heat, and the materials punish you for it with warping and layer splits.
This is where I confess my interest is only partly professional. Big build volume means terrain pieces printed as one part instead of 4 quarters glued together. And anyone who's tried to hide a seam running diagonally across a printed ruin knows why that matters. I lost an entire weekend to sanding and filler on a gatehouse once. The seam won. Never again.
The practical warning I'd add for anyone shopping large format, regardless of brand, the failure modes scale with the bed. A first layer that's slightly off across 300 millimeters is a lot of slightly. Long prints mean more hours for something to go wrong at hour 19 of 22, and a failed big print wastes a lot more filament than a failed small one. Big machines reward people who've already got their calibration discipline sorted. They punish people hoping the machine will compensate for habits they never built.
Which is exactly the buyer this seems aimed at. The advanced hobbyist who's outgrown their first machine and wants big parts and real engineering materials without stepping up to a 5-figure industrial box. That middle tier used to be a wasteland. You either bought a hobby machine and fought it, or you spent workshop mortgage money. It's getting crowded with credible options now. That competition is the best thing happening in desktop printing.
Read the full review before spending. Obviously, the summary is glowing, but the details of which filaments they tested and how are what tell you whether it matches your use case. Someone printing nylon brackets and someone printing terrain have very different definitions of excellent. Still, as data points go, an independent test beats a spec sheet every day of the week. And then there's the teaser. Bambu Lab posted an announcement for the R1, its first standalone laser engraver. The entire information content of this announcement is a name, a picture, and the words "coming September." All 3DP wrote it up. The official Bambu account posted it on Reddit, and that is the complete state of human knowledge about this product. No specs, no price, no safety information, no word on software.
Okay, but come on. You can't tell me you're not curious. This is the company that walked into desktop FDM and reset everybody's expectations for what a printer should do out of the box. When they enter a new category, that track record is not nothing. The comment threads under that teaser were already planning workshop layouts.
Track record earns curiosity. It doesn't earn a pre-order, and lasers are not printers. The failure modes are categorically worse. A misbehaving printer makes spaghetti. A misbehaving laser makes fires, toxic fumes, and eye injuries. Cut the wrong plastic, and you're generating gases you do not want in a spare bedroom. Enclosure design, fume extraction, interlocks, laser class ratings. That's the stuff that has tripped up new entrants to this market before, including well-funded ones. None of it is in the teaser, because nothing is in the teaser.
That's fair, and I'll grant that a name and a month is marketing, not news. I've written up enough teasers in my reporting days to know the difference between an announcement and an announcement of an announcement. But strategically, it does tell us something real. Bambu clearly wants to be the whole workshop, not just the printer on the bench. printer, then accessories, now a laser. That's a platform ambition. Whether the R1 is a serious tool or a halo product to round out the ecosystem is the open question.
And it's unanswerable until they publish specs, a price, and above all, the safety design. That last one is where I'll be pickiest, because a company famous for making things easy has a particular responsibility here. Easy and laser is a combination that puts powerful tools in front of people who've never thought about beam safety. My position is simple. This is probably a real product from a company that usually ships polished hardware, and there is currently zero basis for excitement beyond brand loyalty. Vaporware adjacent until proven otherwise.
Vaporware adjacent is generous by your standards, so I'll take it. And September is close. We won't be speculating long. If the specs land and the safety story is solid, I reserve the right to get excited on air.
And I reserve the right to remind you that excitement is not a review. We'll revisit when there's an object instead of a silhouette.
All right, one concrete thing to do this week, and it falls straight out of the Prusa news. If you've been on the fence about an XL Core 1 or Core 1L, the timing just tilted in your favor, because new orders ship as the Gen 2 versions at no extra cost. You're not paying a refresh premium. You're just getting the better machine by default. And if you already own one of these printers, do nothing. Seriously, no panic, no FOMO selling your current machine.
With two riders, wait for the retrofit picture before making any moves as an existing owner. Prusa hasn't published one, and guessing gets expensive. And even the fence sitters should let the first independent Gen 2 tests land before treating the improvement claims as fact. Patience is free, and it's usually right.
Patience is free. Put it on a mug. That's the show. Go print something for someone who needs it. Apparently, the 13-year-olds are setting the bar now. Talk next week.